Hello, everyone. This is Emily. I am going to share a little bit about media and entertainment industry, and then I will introduce our session speaker. So the US media and entertainment industry is one of the largest in the world. It includes motion pictures, television programs, commercials, streaming content, music, audio, recording, broadcast, video games, and more. So the US media and entertainment industry is expected to reach more than 825 billion by 2023, according to PwC. The COVID-19 pandemic had a huge impact on this industry due to the transition to remote work and learning. Although the industry was expected to slow down its growth, it's ended up growing at its fast rate in a decade. In the streaming services space, technology innovations to improve the quality of streaming are expected to boost the industry growth as a whole. Generation Z takes a leading role in the consumer economy. Companies such as ByteDance, a parent company of TikTok, many of you, probably already heard of, was at a 68 billion back in 2019 when we invested in them. Now the company valued at over 400 billion. In the gaming entertainment space, we see remarkable growth, given today's consumers have access to multiple devices, such as PC, mobile phones, digital physical console, and other devices. Companies like Epic Games and Discord have gained millions of new users in the past year, and they are continuing its growth momentum. So in fact, we currently have access to invest in Epic Games and Discord. If you're interested, feel free to reach out after the conference. Going forward, we expect this industry will continue to add new innovations and bring applications to the market. Now I am going to introduce our session speaker. Sunny is an early stage investor. He focuses on seed and Series A investments in consumer enterprise software. His selected investments include Cruise Automation, acquired by General Motors, Tanner, acquired by Google, Phoenix Labs, acquired by SEA, Garia, Boxed, the Nightcloud. Previously, he co-founded the Bar2, one of the first mobile dating startups in Apple Store.
Yeah, so before Sunny joins, I will just give a little intro. So Sunny has been a friend of ours for over the last 7 years. We have actually asked Sunny to join us in China when we hosted our also quarterly meetups and many different locations. Sunny has been very active investor in both media tech, enterprise SaaS, and other deep tech areas. We're very glad to have him joining us today. Hi, Sunny, how are you?
I'm sorry I'm late. How's it going?
Good. Well, we have a great, conference so far. We've been up since 6 a.m., but
oh, it's amazing. There's a really cool crypto conference going on here right now.
Yeah.
So we're learning about all things. Exactly. We're learning about all things NFT from a bunch of, these kids don't look any older than 13, 14 years old sometimes, but they're definitely the cutting edge of this stuff. So it's a good place to be right now.
Yeah, well, good to see, and hopefully you'll see you, in 2 days. So
exactly, I look forward to it.
That's a great segue into actually our next panel, which is actually on crypto. But first of all, we're very happy to have you here to talk about media entertainment tech. To get started, we already gave everyone a brief intro about your backgrounds, but maybe you can just walk us through, given your years of experience at Warner Brothers and investing, co-founding Barstool, right? What exactly would you say are now the biggest trends in media entertainment tech?
Yeah, so I think that this has been an amazing year for gaming companies, right? Everyone who wasn't a gamer before, while they were stuck indoors, were kind of playing something, whether it was, getting involved in Fortnite to hang out with their kids, whether it was engaging in certain mobile games, whether it was the feeling of loneliness that brought you into gamified fitness, or the gamified social networks that sit on top of Peloton. There's gamification to everything, right? So I think that as an ongoing trend from a UI, UX, social interaction kind of layer, we saw this once before. in the early Facebook days when you had social gaming companies like Playdom, that we co-founded, and Funzio and Zynga that my partner, was a founding team member of, et cetera. You see a lot of those same things resurge now, in that people applying badges, level ups, messaging, GIFs, rich media that they're kind of integrating into various, multimedia messaging streams. You're seeing a lot of that come back all over again to, boring price software, to marketplace tech, et cetera. And we're actually looking to China for a lot of the lessons there for what we're seeing over here, outside of where I know we should always probably keep politics out of everything, but we were always hearing China, and from the certain politician who I did not support in charge. And I think the thing is that, yes, there's been IP infringement, I'm sure, for Frontier in some regards, but there has also been massive inspiration for models that China's far ahead of the West on. Group buying and Pinduoduo, live streaming, from retail stores like, shops and Pop Shop Live and all that kind of stuff that we're seeing raise monster rounds here now. So I think there's really interesting lessons from gaming, with the world's biggest gaming company being Tencent, the Chinese behemoth that it is, a global entertainment company at this point, right? So I think that certain lessons from the gaming world coming into the mainstream, at the same time, the last time we saw something like this was when everybody was playing Nintendo Wii. So I think that there is a resurgence that COVID has created in interest in gaming once again. And we can see that with the multiples that are being paid for games that show any evidence of product market fit, that show any kind of success coming out of beta. Anybody leaving Riot Games is getting giant term sheets these days to start their new gaming companies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think gaming's been a very popular area within entertainment that I started my career in, that I've been glad to see research during the pandemic. Another area is the use of artificial intelligence in games. This is where we're seeing GPT-3. This is where we're seeing the rise of artificial intelligence bringing characters to life in rich and exciting ways. Think about when you're playing Grand Theft Auto and the random drug addict on the street, the thief that stole your car, all the random interactions that you could have with all the non-playable characters, the NPCs, bringing those together in a rich, robust way by giving them backstories, giving them very robust backstories based upon what your in-game activity has been up until this point. This takes me back to when I was a teenager and I was reading those, those choose your own adventure kind of books for Dungeons and Dragons, where do you want to cast the magic missile at the Gilgameth or whatever it was called, or the Beholder, and whichever page you would turn to would dictate your activity. Having millions of iterations of that decision tree being developed on the fly, that is something that GPT-3 is enabling at this point. So there's 2 or 3 really cool companies that are doing just that within the game space right now. A couple of them in the States, one of them in Europe that we've been tracking, bringing characters to life by giving them brains. That's really what it translates to, right? Why does that have to exist just in games? What about leveraging that to bring characters to life from rich IP? So, my fund has close relationships with Disney, Warner, and Warner Brothers. I was ex-Warner Brothers corp strat myself, working on DC Entertainment while I was there. When I was a young kid growing up in a small town, going to my comic book store to buy like the latest Spider-Man or Silver Surfer or Galactus comic or whatever on a Thursday, whenever it would drop, do you know what a pain in the ass that was to have to go line up? I get yelled at by my tiger mom being like, why did you skip school? It was just like a bad vibe. It was not a good, fun experience, but I was obsessed with the IP. I didn't know what Empire State University was. I didn't know, what Peter Parker studied. I just knew I wanted to learn more about it. I remember seeing all the ads in those comics because they're imported for like all this American candy that you just didn't get in the UK where I grew up. So it's, I'm learning so much about the US culture from this, et cetera. Imagine what it would have meant to me to do an AMA and Ask Me Anything on Reddit or TikTok or whatever the platform is with Peter Parker. Why can't I speak to, Eddie Brock playing Venom? Why can't I ask, what's going on in the world of the X-Men on a daily basis with Wolverine, right? I'm really showing my nerd colors to your audience right now. But the idea is that you can use GPT-3 to give living minds to many of these characters within certain constraints of what the personality type would be. What would they be talking about? How much can you ingest data-wise of the personality, et cetera, to bring it to life? Then you can use deep fakes to copy the face. We've all seen the app Reface, where you can take your face and put it on somebody else's body in a music video, and it's hilarious. It's great. I've got our own company, Sway, which lets me film TikToks like this, if you'll indulge me for a second. So this is an example of a deep fake of me for the entire body, where you can bring to life characters in a variety of different ways. So we're at a point right now where GPT-3, deep fakes, et cetera, are all at a really rich point of bringing characters to life in exciting ways. And I think that's another big trend that we're spending a lot of time on these days as well. So I think those are some of the main trends: gaming, deep fakes, artificial intelligence, that we've been spending a lot of time digging into these days.
Got it. Well, gaming also, entertainment media is a very big, umbrella, I would say. How would you broadly define the vertical, right? And which sub verticals will investor be should they pay more attention to? So if we look at right now, the emerging ARVR, in looking at areas where, hardware is also having a, role in gaming, et cetera. Do you mind telling us more about, these sub verticals?
Yeah, I think hardware has always been something that's been challenging to invest in because it's CapEx intensive. So, hardware around AR and VR, for example, with Oculus, the idea of creating a platform to build content, immersive content into, everybody hoped for that when Facebook acquired Oculus for $2 billion a few years ago, right? I think that the hardware is not really where it needs to be for VR to be a robust ecosystem as yet. As much as I want it to be a real thing, I think that AR is the bigger play to be had in the near term, largely resulting from Apple giving us glasses of some kind. But I think VR headsets need to be made lighter. They need to be made cheaper. They need to be heavily subsidized by Facebook or whichever manufacturer wants to do so, to be able to make content that's accessible for everybody. I think wellness and mindfulness are actually really exciting opportunities within VR. Nenea Reeves has a company called Trip that's all about immersive wellness kind of within VR. But I think that, when you see Ghost in the Machine, when you see, Fifth Element, when you see like all these futuristic kind of cityscapes, and you see, holograms kind of imposed on top of buildings, on top of clothes, et cetera. I think that's the augmented reality opportunity where you have a whole new operating system to kind of do digital overlays on top of. That's a very exciting place to spend time, though there's not a whole lot to do there until one of the base layer core tech companies, Facebook, Google, Apple, et cetera, give us a piece of hardware that we can build at scale upon. Basically, we're looking for a recreation of the iPhone, that kind of device penetration to have a platform to build upon for either AR and VR, and neither of them are there yet. I think one of the other areas you mentioned within hardware specifically, rather than just headsets, are peripherals. So this is where you can have like handheld gaming controllers that you can put on top of your phone, where you can have like immersive kind of gloves or tactile kind of sensory inputs for interacting with various games. Once again, I think that nothing there is too revolutionary. Like, I mean, do you remember you had phone cases that had games built into them in the past? You had, Harajuku kids were doing this in Tokyo like 20 years ago on like various like handheld games that they were taking. We had like, what was it? The Lynx, I think, was one. And then you had the Sega Game Gear. And now obviously you have the Switch. They're great casual gaming devices, but they're not investment opportunities. Like Nintendo owns the upside from that hardware. So It's not really an area that we've been spending much time in, to be honest with you. But look at what's going on with Mirror. Look at what is going on with Peloton. These are venture-backed wellness companies. Tonal is another one. There's a heavy amount of gamification that's gone into their content platform, for example. And those are like fitness, right?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely spend the largest, I would say, broadest area when it comes to entertainment tech. I think one thing everybody talk about is this year, right? Finally, every American so far, or at least the younger ones, have woken up to TikTok, right? We're a big investor in ByteDance, got in back in 2018, 2019, again, 68 billion valuation. Now it's 450 billion, right? Or more, depends on where you see the private markets. We love to learn more about, what do you think is really creating this kind of increasing consumer power Gen Z, right? Like, how do you see the Gen Z from a cultural perspective relate to the older generation? And how can media and entertainment tech best cater to this generation? Is it still as kind of our, previous president mentioned it, right? We got a pro Triller, which is American creation versus TikTok. What's your thoughts on that?
as much as I think it's terrible for society, when I see how much time we're all spending watching one of the Logan Paul or Jake Paul brothers get beaten up on Triller.
Right.
The numbers are there, the eyeballs are there, and it's a demonstration of what celebrity means to a younger generation than ourselves, right? Like millennials, we're old now. Like we're not the tastemakers in any capacity. The fact that we're teaming up with Gen Z people doing the hashtag Free Britney thing is like, it's cool, but it's cool because it's retro now. Like when did Britney Spears become a retro thing? But it is. That's where we're at right now in life. So I think the opportunity to identify what we've seen from Reddit, YouTube, evolving now to, beyond Instagram to now TikTok and ByteDance and Triller and everything. I think you're seeing the new wave of entertainment. Some of that is algorithmic for sure. And I don't think Google holds a hegemony on all things algorithms. I mean, China's already beats us at that on a daily basis on a variety of verticals. So I don't think that, the algorithm is any kind of protection. TikTok has proven that it's not, right? Because it's got a better one. I think the idea to be able to build robust and diversified 360 entertainment experiences around these content partnerships, that's something that Hollywood has traditional muscle and clout around, right, and that they did a good job of with Twitch and YouTube early on, but we haven't really seen TikTok flex yet. It's still very much in its nascent days of monetization. I personally spend far too much time on the platform, and I think the ads are invasive, irritating, and every second or third video there's an ad now, right? But so be it. That's what happens when you have captive eyeballs. I think being able to do robust merchandise, supply chain as a service, catalog opportunities like Pietra, my friend's company, Jaden's company, Pietra from Andreessen does kind of innovation as a service for influencers who want to, merchandise as a service, I should say, who will give you, choose from these 50,000 candles. We have the factory to make it at scale. We have the relationship there. We have the supply chain and the fulfillment to get it to your fans. You are purely the marketing engine. I think what Triller has realized, as well as these celebrities themselves and their managers and talent at UTA, CAA, William Morris, et cetera, they realize that these people are the marketing engines at the top of the funnel, and the rest of the supply chain needs to be obfuscated away, because it's not something that's tremendously value add from a differentiation point of view. It's a scale business. The same way that we see Thrasio and others kind of acquiring all these Amazon and Shopify brands, I think there's similar scale benefits to be had on the creator merchandising and fulfillment side of things. It's an Amazon business that Amazon hasn't touched effectively.
Right, exactly. And on that note, we also do a lot of media tech and investments like Patreon, right? What's going on with Epic Games? You mentioned a lot of gaming Discord. So what do you think are some of the, underlying, right? Obviously there's COVID. In fact, basically a lot of people are now staying home. They have the time to create the media content. What are some things that you feel like are kind of driving this type of, growth into the creator economy, for example, Discord community building, right? What are some macro factors that contributes to this?
Sorry, so help me understand the question again. Parse that down for me. Say that again.
Yeah, sure. So basically, we've seen the growth in companies like Patreon, like Discord, Epic Games, right? We talked about the Gen Z being a big part of it. We talked about a little bit about COVID, right? So what are the other things you think contributes to the growth of these companies?
Yeah, sure. So COVID's been a massive one, but we'll put that to the side like you asked. I think a generational shift, I should say, a generational shift occurring away from the platforms that one's older siblings and now parents use. You know how weird it is when my mom, comments on every single Insta story that myself or my significant other post. It feels a little bit invasive. It makes you think, oh my gosh, adding, limited privacy settings and stuff just becomes very convoluted and difficult, and you forget to turn it on and off, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that getting away generationally to a cool platform, which is just for young kids or just for people your own age, where there's not parents watching and stuff, I think that's one element to it. I think Discord, usually you see fringe behaviors coming to the center, specifically from, gaming communities. it's usually, I think I hear an echo, by the way. There's gamers oftentimes are frontier adopters of new technology, new consumer behaviors, et cetera. So I think Discord is a much better way of communicating with your teammates when you're doing raiding parties in various online games, League of Legends, et cetera, talking about games afterwards, organizing meetups around games, LAN parties back in my day, right? I think that really filled a user opportunity at the time with highly engaged, heavy eyeballs focused kind of. So it only goes to show if you can have gamers as a use case on mobile, largely cross-platform at this point, but on mobile, when it really hit gold, you have to remember Discord started as a gaming company. It was started by Jason Citron, I believe, who co-founded OpenFaint that he sold to Gree previously, right? So we know those types of guys really well, and they're authentic. They are gamers. It's an authentic for us, by us kind of strategy that they have. So he built a solution for himself and for gamers that he knew very well. It turned out that was highly applicable for many other verticals as well. Like, hey, if you want to talk to your friends about, things way beyond gaming, pop culture, have digital communities that are cross-platform but centered on mobile. He filled that zeitgeist at a time where the alternative was WhatsApp. But once again, do you want to be on Facebook or on WeChat? WeChat's not for everybody. Line has a fragmented audience, around the world as well. So I think Discord filled that gap of like kind of Gen Z, digital first, like online first culture. It kind of filled a gap for that. They did a really good job of making sure that all the esports, rise of esports, and the rise of spectator gaming and all that kind of stuff fell with their remit and recourse as well. And they have good relationships with a lot of other game publishers to have native integrations. They made the platform open so that it's easy to integrate into your game, et cetera, et cetera. When it comes to Patreon, I actually think that Jack Conti's a really smart guy. I think that what they've done was ahead of its time. And I think that actually that hurt them a little bit at the beginning because it made things look a bit slow. This is like a bit of a quieter company based out of, I think the CEO is based out of Oakland. It didn't scale completely correlated to YouTube's success at the early days and all this kind of stuff. But now it's huge and it's growing on on a tear at this point. So I think you're an investor. Congrats if you are. I think there's it was a canary in the coal mine for a whole other set of understanding. And this is really weird, like for those of us who have kids on the call, you know how weird it is when you invest all this money in your kids for Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, Cambridge, whatever, and then they turn out that they tell you that they want to be a creator. My cousins have said this to my aunt and uncle, and they were like, what the hell does that even mean? And like, what are you talking about? I think this exists. This creator tools ecosystem exists because that is now a viable career path, or that's a viable time contribution that people see as legitimate because the status that they gain from it is legitimizing. It's somewhere that they want to invest time to create content. It used to be the rule of 90-10, right? Like 10% of people create content, 90% of people lean back and consume it. You're seeing content creation tools bring down the barrier to creating cool content. I showed you our company Sway that helps you dance and pop and lock or Carlton dance or whatever you want at the click of a button. Most people aren't going to get off their lazy butts and ever do that dance. But if they click a button and they can be beautified, they can do the instant dance, they can import the music from Jeremy Ehrlich at Spotify, et cetera. It makes it much easier and it makes it more viable for you to create or for you to remix or for you to add your spin for your group of friends that you then share that export to Discord or something, right? So I think I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but I think that the idea of the creator tool ecosystem is something that's only got a lot more upside still to go from here because we're barely scratching the surface of what it means to be a content creator these days. Think about the financing opportunities to finance the merchandising lines. There's a company called Carrot that does just that. Think about the build once, stream out to multiple platforms at a variety of times. Think about integrating the live in-store shopping experience like pop shops or shop shops, for example, right? So there's a variety of things that I think contribute to the rise of these companies. I'm seeing in the chat.
Yeah. Ben, would you like to ask the next question?
Sure. Thank you, Catherine. Sunny, wonderful to meet you and have you on with us. My name is Ben Zeror. I just want to introduce myself to you. I lead research and investments here at MarketX. I did a ton of research on Discord and Epic Games and Patreon, and I'm super interested in what's happening in the metaverse, especially with what Mr. Sweeney at Epic Games is trying to build over the next few years. Do you think that in terms of all the worlds that are being virtually built, there will be one single metaverse that's going to combine those worlds, or is it going to be sort of a similar to the world geography where there will be sort of virtual nations, right? And my follow-up to that is, how will this affect the way we interact, the way we conduct commerce, and the way we communicate with each other?
So have you seen the movie or read the Ready Player One book, Ben?
Yep.
I have, yeah.
So the idea of one corporation owning that base layer, I think the only way that happens is if they own the hardware, or if you want to go really science fiction and Elon Musky about it, when they own the implants, the Neuralinks or whatever else, whatever the base interactive technology is between the human body and the digital world around it, that person, I think, owns that customer. The same way that back in the 90s, when your ISP, your internet service provider, was your gateway, AOL owned you because it owned what you saw on your homepage. The people are lazy. They want to be fed stuff. That's why TikTok works so well, because it's algorithmic. It gives you more and more of what you want without you having to do very much besides watch, right? You vote with your feet and your eyeballs of getting away from, what you don't like and spending more time on what you do like. I think whoever owns that first page, that first thing you see in front of your eyes, is someone that becomes the land grabber for that real estate of mindshare as the next major media company emerges. That could be done through a couple of ways. It could be done through the technology. It could be done through the content. If I was Apple, I would have actually outright tried to buy Disney during its dip during Corona, when the theme parks were hurting, so that you'd have leading hardware and you'd have leading content, like the world's best content with Marvel, Star Wars, and Disney characters, etc. So I think that what I'm trying to say is there'll be a land grab. Whoever has the best UI, UX, the best form of hardware, the cheapest hardware, the best quality hardware, whatever the function ends up being, the elasticity ends up being for consumers, that is the person that I think that builds the platform that everyone then builds the content for. And I do think that first mover advantages are going to be very real things, because people are going to be blown away when they see what some of these AR devices can do, or mixed reality devices can do. You don't really even need hardware to experience the metaverse. You could go to Fortnite and see it right now. Anywhere that somebody identifies with their player avatar, that is an embodiment of them, right? So the opportunity becomes, if I invest in virtual clothing, if I buy virtual goods for it, if I build a better virtual home for the avatar on Animal Crossing, et cetera, that is a representation of my digital self, whether I'm that little panda running around or the video game character like killing other people in Fortnite. That is an extension of me, of my status, of my digital life, of my gamer persona. So I think that we will definitely see attempts. Every gaming company will try and do that. Will try and have a walled garden for their own metaverse game, et cetera, right? But I do think that there will be mass portability that will be figured out through the blockchain or through other forms where gamers kind of own their own skins and they own their own NFTs, for example. This is part of why I think NFTs are so exciting. When you have augmented reality glasses and you're the only one that owns the license to a particular design for virtual clothing, for example, think about how much money you can make when you license that out on a royalty basis for people for augmented reality. So that anyone wants to project their design onto their shirt for Supreme or whatever, every time it gets viewed by another set of glasses, that's a monetizable event, the same way a pay-per-click or a pay-per-view ad was going to be in the past. So I do think that there's monetizable reasons to have cross-promotion of a variety of IP, et cetera. But I think the first wall gardens we're going to see are around content brands and around tech hardware brands as they emerge. But I think Ready Player One is where it eventually goes.
Yeah, and I think that very much is relevant to our next session on NFTs and crypto. But before that, let's still talk more about the investments you made. Obviously, you made many successful investments. I'm particularly interested, why Manscaped? Can you tell us more about that?
You had to choose the most sensitive one to talk about, given what it does. I'm sure a lot of the gentlemen on this call have been targeted because it's one of the biggest spenders of digital ads. I'll call it what it is now, which is a men's grooming company, a men's personal care company. We invested in it specifically down to the strength of the community. So it's not just a hardware device of a body hair trimmer like it originally started. It owns loyalty. It has loyalty amongst a very it has a very loyal customer base of young and older men these days. Once you have that customer that's very loyal to you, your LTV economics would demand that you upsell additional products, right? That are also equally high or equally or higher gross margin in the future. So we went into it because we thought that men's cosmetics is heavily underexploited. Dollar Shave Club was started by friends of mine who really demonstrated what you can do when you use tongue-in-cheek, content-driven customer acquisition at the very early days in a new category. And we realized that you can start selling a lot of very profitable items besides just beauty products in the future. Look at Keeps, Hims, Romans, et cetera, out there for indications of where certain companies could go in the future. And pharmaceuticals are even more high margin and better than beauty products are from a profitability perspective, right? I think you go into a whole different set of, and I'm not saying that's where they're going or anything. I'm just saying you go into new categories that take you into a new risk reward profile as well. The minute you start getting into pills and things like that, you start getting into very dangerous territory as well when it comes to regulation and ethics and morals, which we think some of the other companies out there should be doing probably a better job of. You can't prescribe mental health pills like they're, pieces of gum, like they're very serious things that you're prescribing. The reason we did Manscaped is because it had very similar kind of LTV capabilities as some of our gaming companies early on. It was amazing margins, amazing growth, and true genuine community, the way that a viral game had is kind of how we found our way to it.
Great, thank you for sharing. And I was about to ask another question since you started talking about, what's going on in that world. We also looked at a lot of companies, in the haptic space, what's going on, whole nother world. But before we go into that, we have Sarah here, Sarah Chen. She represents Beyond the Billion, is a women's investment group. So Sarah, would you like to ask your next question?
Sure. Hi, Sunny. I really enjoyed your comments there. Quick question, you mentioned ByteDance, you mentioned a couple of, some of these verticals where a lot of them are grown in China, and conscious of the group that we're in here that specifically looks at cross-border. What's your view on the crackdown with, what happened recently on Didi, and what are you telling fellow investors with the confidence on this US-China relations? Business-wise, TikTok is growing, it's huge. We know that, right? But at the same time, the threat of government regulation and just US-China relations is real. How are you thinking about that? How do you mitigate that? And what do you tell your investors?
Really good question. And I'm not the right person to ask it to, unfortunately. We do majority US investing. We do have international LPs who have operations that are impacted by, the kinds of situations you're talking about. The better folks to talk to about this kind of stuff are a lot of the cross-border firms. So there's people like Hans Tung over at GGV. Sequoia has great China programs that communicate great with their Silicon Valley teams. I'm sure there's dozens of others as well. From what I know, the CFIUS stuff is very real when it comes to M&A or listings and things like that. Anywhere that there's, it used to be that you could always find a global set of buyers for liquidity events, right? as a VC in our portfolio, but then especially for gaming, when Tencent, NetEase, Nexon, well, not Nexon, NetEase, Giant, and a few others were all potential buyers. That stuff starts getting under scrutiny when your user base are heavily engaged with your product, and it could be used as a platform for propaganda in the future, right? I'm not saying that it was, of course, but these are the kind of questions that regulatory bodies ask with a very suspicious lens before any kind of deal could ever progress. So to keep it simple, for what we've always done, the simple answer is we invest 90% of our dollars in the US, the rest largely in Europe and LATAM, where we don't have these kind of similar kind of constraints. But I think as an investor, I would be foolhardy if I did not accept that many of the consumer trends that we're looking for are already quite solidified in China. And I think Pinduoduo and others like them are already leading the charge on many of these trends.
Yeah, maybe I can chime in for a little bit, since we do a lot of deals in China. We were early investors in Douyu, which is like the Twitch of China. We're early investors in Tencent Music, which is also entertainment tech. We got in a 9 billion, IPO was 31, right? So that happened in like 6 months time. China obviously is creating a lot of interesting business models such as TikTok, but they also have the second, third players in the short video. Basically, if you look at Kuaishou, right, that's target at third tier city, fourth tier cities that are looking for these type of short, form streaming devices. And that actually went down to become a very good investment. We saw it go from 6 billion to, 30 to, the IPO was very successful, right? So many of the investments that we made are kind of in the entertainment business, partially because there's lack of, not lack of, but less scrutiny from the government, right? Because it's purely consumer based, purely, for entertainment, there's less like political scrutiny. So on one hand, we can see there's more actual freedom in China for the entrepreneurs to start businesses in that aspect and go beyond, right? The origin story of TikTok is that Musical.ly was actually founded by a guy in Shanghai who wanted to target the US market. It just so happens most US people in the age group of middle school, high school, kids are actually, more open to like watch videos. And China, unfortunately, everyone's taking tests trying to pass the national exam, right? So funny enough, this company actually became more popular in the US and then eventually got acquired by Toutiao, which is basically the parent company ByteDance, right? That's kind of the origin story. So we see a huge, potential in terms of consumer entertainment tech coming out of China and then go everywhere else. And then you see actually US copycats of that business model, right? Which we already, mentioned a few. But going forward, I'd love to learn from you, Sunny, like when it comes to, looking at the next gen, right? Haptics, when we're looking at the ARVR or some of these, like, basically glasses allows you to almost like a CIA technology. You can see in like dark and vision when it comes to like using hard contact lenses, like your Oculus Rift, right? All these different kind of new generation, even more, I guess, Mission Impossible type of businesses. What do you see the going forward, the most exciting companies coming out of this? And tell us more about the future, right? What else should we expect coming out of entertainment tech?
Yeah. So I think it's very easy to fall in love with your own science fiction desires or vision that you want to project onto companies sometimes. And you can sit there and talk with a founder based off of every science fiction writer, every, tech utopia kind of novel that you've read. It's very easy to talk yourselves into believing that a certain piece of tech can become very much Shangri-La-esque and kind of fulfill fantastical visions. I think there's a few visionary entrepreneurs out there that are currently leading the charge in this capacity. One of my favorite writers is Ramez Nam, who wrote the Nexus trilogy of books. He's an ex-computer scientist, amazing writer. He was at Microsoft for a long time, and these books are just tremendous. They talk about what happens when you have interconnected nanobots injected into your body that allow you to have connectivity on a whole new scale. The Borg from Star Trek, and that you inject it and everyone's part of a hive mind and you can interact kind of like Neo from the Matrix with various items out there that are web connected. I think we're at like, not even the first inning. We're at like, not even embryonic. We're at the very first onset of life with what Elon Musk is talking about by restoring, people with epilepsy or various nerve disorders with Neuralink, et cetera. I think that's really interesting. I think that haptics are still very early. There's nothing there that's really blown me away in a portable capacity. But I think what Palmer Luckey has been doing and how he thinks about the world is another one of those kind of entrepreneurs that is not really limited by traditional Stanford or Menlo Park ways of thinking. Like he kind of has a very beats to his own drum. But I do think that probably augmented reality and manifestations of the metaverse within the next 5 years are very real possibilities with the patents we've been seeing and the people that we've been hearing about working on things at Apple. So I actually think that Apple's AR glasses is the next major platform to be really excited. And there's going to be all these things that everyone's been, your next panel, all the NFTs that have been making all our crypto prices go up. And for some reason, they've all been tanking now. I'm not the guy to ask why, but I think seeing that come to life in a whole new robust way is going to be a big manifestation of the next gen of what avatars and your digital self looks like. So I think AR is probably one of the big platforms I'm most science fiction wise excited by.
Thank you very much. Also, I wanted to leave some time for people who want to ask questions here. I see there is another question regarding, I guess the audio is not great, so I'll just ask on behalf. So when it comes to, kind of deep tech and also just like what is being used, so what are the kind of ethical, right? Like for example, deep fake voice in, generated AI, like what do you see are some risks that we're seeing in this business now? Technology has grown to be so efficient at making these things, and obviously fraud and potential, crime might arise from this. What are some things that we should keep in mind when it comes to developing next gen technology and entertainment tech, but, looking out for the privacy and safety of, platforms? What are something that you feel like we should really keep top of mind?
Detection. Being able to say what is real and what is fake is incredibly important, especially when it comes to highly sensitive information like government information or election time or news, for example. If you can't trust the person that you're seeing as being genuinely that person, then all truth is moot. Everything becomes a polarizing discussion, and we become the fall of Rome, and we burn amongst Nero playing the fiddle. This is not to be taken lightly. Scalable misinformation, willful misinformation using deep fakes technology is absolutely one of the biggest risks, I think, to our global, that I would possibly be able to opine on at this point. The ease of which one can create deep fakes, that it can be mass produced, that it cannot be detected by the untrained eye. It's getting better and better and better to the point of where you're not supposed to be able to detect anything that's fake about the transmission. Detection of deep fakes needs to be an ongoing area of investment. Like this should be a very important, like the way that DARPA was out there before funding stuff. This needs to be very important, as we saw what happened, with meddling in election information and stuff before. This goes so much worse than that when you actually see the person being a fake version of that speaker, for example. So detection through digital watermarking. There's blockchain solutions to say that when I'm broadcasting something, it is of me, and this token verifies that it was of me, for example. I think Ben just commented on this. It's absolutely one way around that, although I think it's still very early days, to the point of where you have blockchain connected cameras that are all streaming, or a platform that you're video streaming through that goes through a server that, like, how do you not say that the server's messed with it? How do you not say someone at Amazon Web or Google Cloud has not messed with your feed? So it's we haven't seen it all the way through an end-to-end solution of blockchain being a good use case there yet, but it's an early interesting area to spend some time on. The other thing to think about is when you're talking about bringing characters to life, like remember I said, what if you could bring Spider-Man to life on TikTok? That's amazing because it lets you scale celebrity. Tom Holland doesn't have to do 1,000 different press interviews in different languages, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a scalable celebrity. But what if that brand's puppeteer was nefarious? Then all the brand value that had been invested in Spider-Man to date, the billions that had been accrued for shareholder value and spent on the Marvel acquisition, et cetera, could all be brought down with, willful, nefarious, or malicious uses of that IP that are indistinguishable from the real thing, right? So I think detection is, once again, I want to keep focusing on, is a very important area to spend time on, to make sure that what you're seeing is really actually being said and true.
Thank you so much. I believe that, Ben mentioned about a little bit of blockchain, and I think the rest of the audience also have a couple more questions. I noticed that, you worked at Warner Brothers as well. I mean, I started as a financial analyst at Warner Brothers, funny enough. So what
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know. We were apparently ex-colleagues. So what do you think is like important lessons you learned from that world, right? Like looking at strategy coming from these more incumbents like entertainment or, the older generation. What do you think are some of the applicable lessons you learned from that world that applies to your investment, philosophy today?
Yeah, so I think specifically what it means to build and grow and manage and engage a geek community is something that I learned I learned a lot about there, not doing it myself, but specifically seeing it done for the Lord of the Rings franchises, for the DC Comics franchises, et cetera. I thought that was a really interesting thing in the early days of the YouTube ecosystem. A lot of that has not changed in the creator tools that you're seeing out there about managing your audience, selling to your audience, engaging your audience in a scalable way. There's new manifestations of those tools that we saw back then, for example. But the biggest takeaway from that experience for me was very much being able to see what it meant for a big corporate to really think that something that you and I do is interesting. It might be interesting for a dinner table conversation. It might have a cool video that to spit out, like I just showed you for, I could create a meme of somebody dancing or something. But to be able to create a scalable solution that can be plugged in very much at scale, I want to reiterate, at one of these big entertainment companies was a very insightful thing. Just because you can do something doesn't mean someone cares. So how could you productize it? How could it make money in the near term? How could that plug into the mothership? You can be a cool little TIE fighter flying through an asteroid field, learning all of these cool new technologies, but you have to step in line with the Imperial fleet for the Emperor to give a shit about what you do. So it's the same thing goes, I think, for any entertainment tech that I'm excited by at any point in time. The entertainment companies are rarely the earliest adopters of that tech. It's usually the tech companies that get there first. And then you go to the entertainment companies for their branded IP thereafter.
Great. Thank you so much, Sunny. That was a lot of fun facts and also great insights. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in Paris soon.